You don't have to start again because you don't
No,
have to.
that's all right.
There you go.
No
Okay.
worries. So
Thank
kind of
you.
going back to where it was, I've worked a lot with technology transfer offices, so PhD level academics and scientists that are really trying to bring their ideas to market. And this is something that they've really struggled with because they come from a very technical background. And the idea of really finding that way to communicate and connect with people can be really challenging and very difficult. And if this is something that is difficult for you, don't worry, it's a skill that you can begin to develop. And really, it does feel unfortunate sometimes. It's not a building businesses is not a meritocratic situation. Is oftentimes the best technology does not win. I have seen so many cases where you have really incredibly brilliant products that are surpassed by those that are better connected, that are in a better position strategically because they have the right connections, the right backers, the right people, the right financing behind them. And it can be really frustrating because you just think, I would just build especially when we have a hackathon situation, I can just build the best, the most efficient, the sleekest, nicest product. But sometimes that product doesn't win because it is not tangible, it is not made, it is not communicated in a way that the audience, that those on the other side of the table really can connect with. So if this is something that is a skill that we can begin to develop and grow in ourselves. So let's talk a little bit about what that involves today. And just very quickly, just a really brief overview. The format of the talk will kind of go in four different parts, but all throughout the presentation, if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat, or Thelma, please stop me if there's something that I'm going too fast over or something that's unclear. It is really kind of presented as an accessible approach to really succeeding at this pitch competition, this hackathon, but also something that hopefully you can take forward kind of into the future. And this is also a bit of a workshop format. So I know that it's a long talk, is it's something that you're listening to someone drone on for a really long time. I really want this to be useful and active for everyone here because I would love for you all to really make some progress on developing your pitch and your presentation while you're here and start to build an outline or some really kind of key concrete ideas as we go along. So I'll be taking a few pauses so that you can kind of jot some notes down. So if you have a pen or paper handy, or if you want to just take some notes in your phone or on your laptop, that would be great because at the end of the talk, you won't just have come away with a bunch of different slides, but you'll hopefully come away with some like really key formative thoughts and ideas about how to set up your presentation if you haven't got that started already. And since we are a few weeks out from the presentations, you probably haven't got started. So it'd be great to get a jump start on that now. And it shouldn't matter if you are not the presenter or the leader of your team. Everyone on your team should take the time to kind of develop some notes so that when you all can come together after the talk or next week when you're working together, you can compare notes and really kind of build and develop off of the solutions that you've kind of come up with. So yeah, really think of it as an active learning opportunity, and if it will help build your deck. And if you have any questions or you want to share what you've come up with, I know it's Saturday. People are shy. There's no pressure. You don't have to share if you don't want to. So I have plenty of examples. So we'll go forward from there. So all right, let's get started. So the first part of this talk, really want to talk about what we need to set ourselves up for. going into a presentation like this, it's really important to know what is expected of us. And that is really kind of one of the most critical points about any presentation, because it is about communication. And one of the most important aspects of effective communication is really knowing the objectives, the requirements, and what that other party that you're communicating with is expecting from you. So what we have going into this is that presentation will be on November 16th, and on November 13th, the teams will be announced that will go forward with doing their presentation. So you have only a few days between when your team is announced to be selected as a speaker to when your presentations will begin. So do not wait until that day. Really kind of start thinking about this right away so that you are prepared to be able to give the best presentation possible. So what is the hackathon looking for? So it is a presentation format of only 6 minutes. You have 2 minutes of a presentation, 2 minutes of live demo, and 2 minutes Q&A. So this is a very short time to get everything you've been working on for the last few weeks across. How are you going to do it? It is something that really takes time to prepare, and something that the earlier you get started, the more effective your presentation will be. So what are the judges looking for? So you are judged. There's a technical judging, which will happen on the 13th, but then the presentation is judged completely differently than the technical side, and is judged by a different group of people. If I understand correctly, it is judged by members from the community. So these are going to be people.
Let me intercede there. So the technical review begins on November 11th.
Yeah.
They have 2 days, and then we get an answer from them for the 13th.
Right. And so the judging for the presentation is completely separate from the technical review. So
it's essentially how well they do the presentation and deliver their information. So I'm sorry.
Exactly. So it is something that you need to think about it as is in some ways separate from the technical side. So you've developed a technical solution, but now the presentation is a completely different, it's a different animal in terms of how you communicate that technical solution to a panel of some potential experts, but also members of the community who may not be as familiar with the technical side of whatever you're developing. They may not be as familiar with the criteria that the different challenges have developed. So this really is about, you need to know who you are going to be presenting for and how those requirements might be a little bit different. So kind of emphasize some of the different things that I want you to keep in mind as you look at kind of really trying to dissect some of the what the judges are looking for. So how well does the system satisfy the requirements? So in those different case selections, there are a number of different requirements. So it's something that is quite technical. The originality in terms of what is creative, what is innovative. Let's unpack this a little bit in this talk. And then utility and impact, how user-friendly or positive impact may it have on users? Well, this might not be something you have done anything with right now. Right now, you've been working on developing the application, but have you even considered how users have used it? Have you reached out to users? That's something you should be thinking about right now as you go forward to be able to have an answer for that section. And then, of course, the general execution and delivery of the presentation, which you only have a very short amount of time to do, and the time limit is very important. So if you want to get the maximum amount of points, you will want to stay within the time allowed, which is ultimately 6 minutes in total, but 2 minutes for that presentation. So since your total score is made of an average of your presentation and your technical, this is essentially half of what the outcome of the hackathon is. So it is very important to to take this seriously. And then there's that second opportunity, the People's Choice Award, which is something that is a very exciting opportunity and does not have anything to do with the technical side. And it is really about how well you connect with the audience. And for me, I think this would be one of the most greatest parts of the hackathon to aspire towards, is really how well do you connect with everyone that's there. And something that, going forward, we'll think about how we can delight and entertain that audience, so that, the People's Choice Award is something that your solution is memorable for them. So looking back at what the hackathon is asking for, they're really looking for four kind of key things that you need to be able to share. Is what is the organization asking for, and how did you solve that? And what is the impact of the solution that you've developed, and how does it achieve the organization's requirements? And then finally, who has brought this solution together, and how did you come about developing this solution to make the impact that they're looking for? So really, it's important to kind of unpack each of these different things. So there is a handy sample presentation that you may see in the materials that Thelma has shared. We'll go through this a little bit later, but this should be familiar to everyone here. So taking it from the top, I want to go over a few really broad outlines about what makes technology presentations work in a more general sense. We've talked about how it's your way of building communication with whoever is your viewer, is the stakeholder, but what are the tenets that make technology presentations really excellent? Well, they have four main goals. Is first, they're supposed to really help you understand what the problem is that you're solving, and to really understand how this team is approaching the problem with a solution that is applicable to the users, that it is better, faster, easier, cheaper potentially than anything else that's on the market. Show what makes whatever you do unique to solving this problem for these users. Then you want to highlight the impact. So what changes, what are the differences that happen when your solution is implemented? And then finally, we want to see that vision of the future. So everything, especially with a hackathon project or anything in early stage technology, we want to see what impact you will be making on the future. So what is that roadmap going to look like? What is going to spark from the development of this solution? So really, you have the opportunity to sell your vision here. Of course, you've only had a few weeks to get working on whatever you're developing, but what could that look like if you take that farther? If the judges invest in your solution as being a winner, what can we expect from that? And you want to leave that audience with the confidence that you're able to deliver on that. So some of the things that we're really looking for in a really excellent presentation is that it feels like a human story. It does not feel like a big technical jargon explanation of how you kind of connected Arduino to a interface, or how you kind of bootstrapped some real Python and strapped a few things together. That is not something that will be an effective presentation for the audience. Remember, the audience that you're reaching on the presentation day is different than the one that you have already sold your technical solution to. So by the time you get to the presentation, you really need to be able to communicate this solution to a broader minded audience. So we really want to be thinking about, okay, how do we break down what we've done, even though it might be very technical? what are those human impacts? And so really thinking about how can we distill this into telling this human story? What does it feel like? What does it look like? And really not trying to cloud it with a technology. It needs to feel simple, elegant, and something that is really built for people to be using. So one of the ways we want to think about this is over the course of your presentation, developing an arc, just as you would in any sort of storytelling. So what is the beginning is talking about what is the situation now? Why has that organization come to the hackathon with this problem they want solved? How did you approach building a solution for that problem? What were the things that you considered? Help us understand, your presentation should share that human journey that you went on as a team to develop a solution and ultimately that vision of change. Some of the problems that can prevent you telling your story effectively is, of course, this technical overload, which I mentioned before, is really kind of pitching the incredible, special, all the hard coding work that you've done in a way that is not tangible for the audience or those that are there to receive that message that you're there to share. You don't want to kind of overwhelm people with that. A lost narrative is something that when you're trying to tell that story and kind of create that human element, that connection, that doesn't necessarily fit with that technical solution. So you want to make sure there's a congruence here. Of course, failure in the demo is everyone's worst nightmare. You have 2 minutes. It is a very important part of your presentation, but we do have some solutions and some suggestions so that you can prevent that from happening. But don't worry if that's what your kind of biggest concern is. And then finally, that unclear user connection. A big part of the judging criteria for this event is based on how well does your solution connect with users, how easy is it to use. And this is something that's not hypothetical. We want to see the judges, they want to see that you have actually done that work to connect with those end users and understand their needs and understand how your solution actually achieves what they are looking for and what that organization is looking for in an end solution. So really importantly, kind of take away the best presentations. Technology is just the means to make that answer for you. The real users matter, their connection. Maybe, of course, none of your code is going to be in a perfect state at the moment. So really, you want to make that human story very clear as you're developing your presentation. It is what makes your product memorable, and by demonstrating that you've done that work to connect and develop that human story, and it will really help make your solution stand out. Evidence, so suggesting being able to show that you have gone out and connected with the users and that you have done that testing in real time will be much more effective than kind of being able to make kind of broad claims. And then the vision must connect to the reality, really demonstrate how you understand what that organization is looking for in that solution and be able to show how you have achieved that in your own unique way. So let's talk a little bit about designing your deck for success. You'll notice my slides here are quite basic, quite boring. And so when we talk about design, it really is a matter of taste, but there are a few kind of key principles that are important to keep in mind as you're thinking about, what are those key slides that I'm going to use in my 2-minute presentation to showcase what I've built. So a few kind of key design basics is you want to be consistent throughout your slides. Don't change fonts or colors or designs too much. This is something that I see a lot in early stage presentations. We have all these really cool new, as you had in your icebreaker just a few minutes ago, you have all these really great tools and resources to build very awesome slides and animations and all this jazz. But sometimes this can be a real distraction, especially when you have only 2 minutes. Use evidence and cite your sources. If you make a claim, kind of developing your solution, or you're speaking about a user journey, cite that example in your slide. Make sure that you can credit something that is actually real. Show the audience and show the judges that you have done your homework and that you're not just making up things. Less is more, especially in a deck like this that will be accompanying a live presentation. Any text on that screen is going to be text your audience will be reading. They will not be paying attention to what you have to say. So anything that goes on those slides needs to be there in a strategic way. Think about how much you can read in 2 minutes, and then think about if you can also read and listen to someone presenting the same time. So less is more, and you have to be really ruthless when it comes to designing your slides here. Know your audience. We talked about this a little bit earlier. These are not going to be largely your technical experts. This is really going to be from the community. This is going to be from the organizations themselves that have put these challenges together for you. Do not make sure that it's on their level, especially jargon. They may be older people, they may not be as familiar. So really try to understand what their needs are. This is everything with presentation is about developing that personal connection. It's a communication exercise, and knowing them and taking that care to know what they're looking for is so important. That's why we talked so long about the requirements really in the beginning. Sloppy decks don't raise money. So I work with early stage startups, and often ones that are much more advanced, and you would be surprised at how many different spelling mistakes, grammar issues, really kind of ugly spacing and whatnot that you see. But I will show you a few of them. If you stay tuned, we have a few coming up here. I'll show you from some of the work that I've done, and you can kind of judge for yourself. Spacing and sizing, of course, if you have text is kind of falling off the side of the deck, that's not good. I wish I didn't have to say it, but I do. Ask for help. You have time. You have a great community on your Slack group. You also have your local really wonderful subject matter experts that are working with you and supporting you through this hackathon. Use those resources. That they will only make your deck and your presentation better. And then finally, I'll suggest a number of different techniques and tools today, but you are the master of your own story. If you want to do things your own way, do it. Fly your own flag, and don't follow any of the rules if you don't want to. So really own it. If you want to kind of throw all caution in the wind, own it and make that your story. But really everything that you do, make sure that it is with intention. So kind of with that, we'll kind of go through a few kind of key tenets of developing an effective deck. And the first one is really starting from the top. Start with a hook. Grab your audience's attention immediately, especially when you're doing a visual presentation. You are standing there. You need to keep their attention. And there are a number of tons of research that shows from, especially when we're looking at pitch decks or anything in the tech and startup space, especially when you have audiences that are jaded because they're seeing a lot of different things. You make that first impression in the first 7 seconds of your talk. So really your first slide, the way you present your opening, it sets the tone for your entire next 6 minutes that you have. So really think about how intentional your initial slide and your initial presentation, your start has to be. You have to use each second of your 2 minutes of your talk really intentionally, and the first 7 seconds are the most important. And within that first 30-second, 60-second window, we've seen from investors, they will decide if they want to learn more or if they're interested or not. So it just really goes to show that your opening is critical to really setting that tone, is grabbing that attention. And as much as you put into the later slides and the demo, if they're not like ready, if they've already decided they're not interested in your demo, it doesn't matter. You won't be able to get them back. So it is super critical to think about what is that way of approaching your audience and kind of getting them to connect. A few ways of grabbing that immediate attention is visual or verbal. And with a talk like this, when you are presenting live, you want them to not be focusing necessarily on the visual. You want them to be listening to you and to be making that connection with you as a speaker. So I'll just show you an example. This is an example of a slide that we had in one of our from one of our startups. I'm not going to everyone is anonymized here, but this was their opening slide to set up their problem. We can kind of see a few things with this slide. What kind of a slide is it? Is it an effective slide? They're trying to set up their problem. And what they're doing with this is they're trying to encourage us to build a connection with this intended end customer, to help us build that connection with them. We learn a lot about Aunt Polly with this opening slide. We know a few things about her. But if this was the first slide that you started your presentation with, and you are standing on the stage, how many people are looking at you? And think about how many people are thinking about Aunt Polly and trying to read through all of these different things, and also thinking, oh my gosh, she has a lot of yarn, and look at all these weird AI pictures. So this is something that it started with a very intentional, very really wanted to tell that story, wanted us to build a connection with this problem that they're solving in the healthcare space, but it was grabbing the audience for the wrong reasons. So maybe if you were doing a presentation where you were not standing on stage, where you were giving this, basically you're sending it as an email, maybe this would be more effective. But you can see a slide like this, really it's trying to do a lot of work for the presenter, but it is kind of counting against them for a number of different ways. We also have a very curious shadow under this, and we see the visual is really distracting. So you can kind of see what they're trying to do here, as compared to a slide like this. We have an opening slide with a very strong visual. You see this person and you're like, okay, why am I seeing this picture of this old lady? Then you have an audience looking at you, wanting to know, all right, why are you showing me this? They're coming to you for that answer. You have them connected to you. They're listening to you. And you can then tell Aunt Polly's story, and they're hearing it from you and not necessarily getting lost in her balls of yarn and whatnot over here. Also, when you use an icon or a generated image like this, there is evidence you do not make as strong a connection as you would with a real human. So it kind of just shows from the onset, there are different ways of making that connection with your viewer, with your audience. So it is something that when you think about what is that first impression you want to encourage your audience to take away from, that there are a few ways of approaching that, and it just shows a different example of how that could be done. Here is another example of an opening problem slide. It does a few different things. I wouldn't say it's a particularly effective slide, but what it does is it's a bit curious. We don't have any answers from this slide. We have no idea what's going on. So the audience has to come to the presenter to find out what's going on. But we also see there's a lot happening here. There's different types of text, different colors, different fonts. It's bold, it's kind of yelling at you. It convinces me very strongly that there's a problem, and it's great that someone is solving whatever this snail and these nuclear silos are doing, but it also is a bit chaotic and is a bit distracting. So I'm convinced that there's some sort of problem. I'm not really sure how you get from the snail to the cardboard boxes, and what their actual solution is nowhere visible on this slide. So they're kind of setting it up in a way that is not as effective as it could be. So really, when you think about how you are presenting that initial slide and grabbing that audience attention really from the onset, really think about, you want them to come away with making that connection with you and what you're offering, rather than being a little bit confused and having to wait more than that 7 seconds to know what's going on. So I just want you to think about, how does your solution hook your audience? Really, maybe take some time, just take a few minutes to think about, what are some ways that you can make what you're doing really exciting to to someone that maybe has no idea about a bird finder app, or an app about kind of developing kind of consumer equity. How can you make that exciting for them? What are the ways to hook them on that problem? So take a little time to think about, what is the most exciting way of introducing your solution, and kind of approach it from that perspective. The next tenet of designing the deck that's important is really knowing your why. And it comes back to that opening hook, is really knowing what that problem is you're solving and who is affected by it. Something with this hackathon that's interesting is a number of different organizations have identified that problem for you, but it's really important that you unpack what that problem is. Kind of take that beyond what you've been provided in the sheet, because this is the narrative that will run completely through your presentation. And think about what that problem could be if you had to explain this solution and explain what you're doing to a 10-year-old. Do you think that you could do it? How could you explain what you do to a 10-year-old that helps them understand why you're spending so much time developing this piece of technology? Is that something that you think you could do? Can you identify one specific person who benefits from what you're building right now? One individual, what do they look like? What age are they? Where are they working? Can you explain, what do they do? What is their family situation like? If you had to identify a specific customer persona who benefits from what you're building, could you do that right now? Could you develop a concrete number to show the scale of the impact that you're making? Could you show anything that gives evidence of the impact of what you've created, or what work you've been doing, or what it might be able to show, or how you could measure it? These are things that you should be thinking about right now, about really knowing what is that down the line impact could look like. And then one way of showing how your solution could grow. So this is kind of going back to the roadmap that we talked about previously, about showing that scale, showing that vision. So where could we go down the line from here? So think about these four different criteria. If this is something that you could answer for your solution right now. And if it's not something you can answer for your solution right now, these are questions that you should try to come together in your team and really try to brainstorm around and really try to be able to understand, because this is something you'll want to be able to communicate in your 2 minutes. Because the best technology presentations, they don't feel like a presentation about technology. They feel like a discussion about talking about change, talking about that change in the world. And that's something that is tangible to a 10-year-old who can understand that, and also be able to understand who is specifically benefiting from it. And then what does that change look like? So these are some things I want you to think about. If you don't have time to write it down now, we can share this afterwards, but something that you should begin brainstorming at this point, thinking about your presentation in a few weeks' time. So really, we talked about the story arc. We introduced that a little bit before, how we want to use storytelling to develop our presentation narrative. And one of the pitfalls about technology presentations is sometimes the technological jargon can be challenging for people to understand. And what storytelling helps you do is make the solution that you're building relatable. It makes it feel like it's something that exists, that is comprehensible, and it also makes what you're building more memorable. So it helps you build that connection. It makes it feel like a human, and it is a really strong communication tool by helping bring people along. It helps you catch them with a hook in the beginning and kind of take them along, and it encourages them to follow the rest of your presentation. So use storytelling as a really important device that you can use to build that connection with the user and your audience that's there for the presentation. So some ways of doing this are by bringing in some specific and relatable examples that show how individuals or organizations are able to use what you've built and what that process looks like. So really talking about it, not in an abstract sense, but talking about kind of what that process looks like. How does it change from before, when that problem was existing, before a solution was there, to how it looks now, and kind of taking them on that journey. So really showing them each of those different aspects of the development that you've gone on. So one way you can begin to develop this, if you're thinking like, how do I bring into a story, into talking about this app about bird finding? Well, think about who is that main character that you're building for? What is their challenge, and how are they solving that right now? And how does that change when I've built my app? And you can build that and create, kind of go from there, from something very initial and very basic, and then develop that into something that is a lot more strong. So talking about really that individual's journey that he's gone on, that it's not just about bird finding, it's about kind of building that community, it's about changing and improving ecology. So that is how you can use storytelling to really develop that narrative around your solution, to show that it is more than what it might appear on the surface. And one way of doing this is talk about from the immediate impact. What is the impact on the local, maybe a school, neighborhood, a building, For example, such as with the Children's Museum case, the community impact or a wider society impact. And this is one way of thinking about how you can develop storytelling in your case. But in the interest of time, we'll just kind of move right along here to kind of go through the different examples. Next, really important for your slides, the visuals should support your narrative and not be a distraction. We talked briefly about distractions, but here is an example of what that looks like. Here is an example from a real-time company right now. There's a lot going on, as I said. We have all these really cool tools to build slide decks now, but you can see if someone has this really exciting solution right here, but we are very overwhelmed by it. We have different fonts, we have bold text, we have different colors, we have this really crazy maze right here that if someone is presenting and standing up next to it, everyone is going to be looking at this maze and like, how can you even get out of this maze? So a more effective way of developing it is with this example. So this communicates the exact same narrative as this slide here, but it shows it a completely different way. And so seeing it at one glance, you get kind of the main story right at the top, and you see, okay, these are the different stakeholders that are going to be affected by this development of this product. And you can see that instantly. Whereas before, you have a lot of reading, it's confusing. And so if you don't have a lot of slides you can use, think about, how you can use this most effectively. And we can see with this that immediately by looking at it one glance, that you've already communicated, here are our different stakeholders that we're actually having that effect on. And your audience is not going to be lost in their slide. They are going to be following what you have to say. So similar and related to this, don't let your text compete with your presentation. This is an example of a slide that was shared with our accelerator, and you're like, wow, you're doing a lot of different things. You're helping. You have 2 minutes. No one can read this and also listen to someone talk in 2 minutes. How can we narrow this down? Well, we can narrow it down to basically very, very specific, clear problem text. And you can use different quantitative data to really make those statements that we choose much more impactful. So people can see by using spacing, what are the very kind of clear takeaways from this case, and they are following you to they are very convinced by whatever you put on the slide, rather than being lost in a big massive text. So we can identify very clearly the two objectives of this slide, the scale and the gravity of the problem. So similar to this is, don't let your audience get lost in a graph. We have talked about, technical jargon can be really challenging, and it's also very difficult because maybe you've done a ton of work and you really want to show all that work you've done. So here's a graph that was shared in one of the slide decks. It's really showing, oh, look at all this work we've done. We have brought all these different people and we've identified all of this. If you present a slide like this to show your evidence, people will completely skip right over it, and they will get lost trying to read this really tiny numbers and to see what's going on here. So another way of presenting this information is in a way that is a lot more user-friendly. We can see by changing the different types of graphs that you actually can make a much stronger argument, and it is very clear and almost instantaneously what you are trying to communicate here. So make sure that whatever appears on your slide is in a position to be able to support what you're presenting. And then next, slides each one of the slides that you have should clearly communicate a specific goal, rather than let your audience really try to figure it out based on what is on there. So here's an example from a dog food company, and it's really trying to show how they are better than the competitors. And you have this really complicated graph right here that really is not very clear of what that actually means. So they do something that, and they're up here in this quadrant, so that must mean they're better. One of your objectives in the hackathon is to show how your solution is unique and different. But if you were to present a graph like this or a diagram like this, it would be very difficult for your audience to really understand what you do better. So another way of doing that is to really kind of distill whatever your competitive advantage is into those unique ingredients that really stand out or make what you do very specific. So it really requires you to focus on a very clear outcome for each of these slides, and to keep editing it till it gets to say only the most important information, so that your audience is there listening to your narrative and what you are saying, rather than kind of getting lost in all the different sides. So that's a way of another way of changing this slide. We changed it up like this. And then of course, if you only have 2 minutes for a presentation, then slides like this that are kind of filler slides are not very useful for you. So think about, each one of these should have a goal. So if you're setting up a problem like this and you're expecting people to be listening, there's nothing for them to kind of hold them. Whereas if you have some sort of image that shows what that struggle looks like, you can attract different types of learners, visual learners, for example, that will be a lot more engaging for your audience. Next, preparing for your presentation. So you only have a few days from the technical judging standpoint. So let's look at some of the different requirements. So we talked about the requirements before. We went through the different things the judges are going to be looking for. This is the criteria again, and let's look at some of the different sample slides that they have suggested. So the first is setting up a title slide. Remember, your title slide is your first impression. So how are you going to grab the audience's attention from the beginning? Your tagline, opportunity to put a tagline, don't make it too long. Make sure that it is succinct, and really think about this sets the tone for your presentation. What do you want? How do you want to excite and inspire your viewers to come? So use this slide strategically. A lot of teams often kind of skip this over as something just like a filler slide. It's not something that it's something that you should think really, really hard about. Next is the agenda overview slide. So and just keep in mind, all of these slides are suggestions. It's not required to go in this pattern. You can change it up however you want. It's just important that you communicate all the different kind of criteria in this slide, in the slides that are suggested. So agenda is maybe, if you have 2 minutes, I don't know if it's necessarily something that I would spend too much time on, or even if you could skip over agenda slide, might be possible, but it's an opportunity to provide a very quick overview and to prepare your audience for the solution that you're going to be presenting, and also to build momentum. So it can kind of serve as that structure. So it's a way of helping to build that momentum and going in and kind of creating that mystique about what you're going to be presenting. Next, you want to be showcasing the different challenge requirements. What is really important is to make sure you've done a close read of the challenge use case document. Your audience that will be in the room and the presentation will not have read it. The technical committee, of course, they understand this as they're evaluating it, but it's important that you in this slide are able to communicate what the organization that's presented the challenge, what they are asking for, and how you have interpreted the needs. So this is where you can bring in that storytelling and before you are able to demonstrate how you solved that need. And here is an example from the Kiki Museum. Of course, they were asking for, we want you to build a interface that has a bar graph or a chart that will change based on what the appliances that are being used. So you might be thinking, in the requirements side, I need to tell them, show how we built this chart and this graph and this interface. But really what they're looking for when it comes to requirements and something that is important for you to be communicating is these different criteria here. So the goal, the business value, and success scenario. And you'll find these in the documents that are provided for each of the different challenges. And it is something, and these are a lot more tangible to be able to communicate in a presentation style than some of the technical requirements, which are not quite as important to kind of give as much detail to, because this is really about telling that story, telling that narrative, and how what you have built achieves these different criteria that these organizations are looking for. The next slide that you will be thinking about developing is your unique approach. This might seem kind of really challenging because there's a number of you that are working on the same challenge, and it may be kind of difficult. You're like, how can I set myself, our team, apart from all of the other teams that are also working on this? And this is really important where you can kind of use numbers to tell that story, to show, and this is where your evidence can come in as well, to show how you're able to make that impact in terms of how users have engaged with the product that you've built, or how you as a team have come together and approached this problem in a way that is unique to you. So maybe bring your story into how you as a team approach solving this challenge and how you came about it. So think about how you can provide a little bit of flavor to your development of this aspect of the presentation. The next slide that you'll be thinking about developing is really being able to show that positive change and the impact. And this is where it's very important to be reaching out to that end user and if it's something that you haven't done yet, this is something that you will really want to start thinking about this week or no later than next week, is really reaching out and understanding what those users that you've identified earlier on that you are building for, what is their feedback. Really talk with your subject matter experts, really understand, like, can you answer all their questions? Is this product actually connecting with them the way that you as a team believe that it is? And maybe it's not. So take all that feedback on board. Don't feel like it's a setback if they're saying, it's not connecting with them the way that you anticipated. That is how you grow and how you develop and make a better solution. So all of that evidence is data that you can then share in your presentation. We went to the users and we found that they were they were looking for a solution that used more color discrepancy in the interface. And so we've incorporated those different changes into our next version of the solution. And by being able to show and demonstrate how you have made that effort to connect and understand how those end users are able and connecting with that product, even if it is in a very early stage. Of course, be able to communicate accurately what stage of the product that it's in, you are in a position to be able to tell the judges and tell the audience something very unique about how you are able to demonstrate your impact. So use quotes, share feedback from the users directly in the presentation if you can. And by making that connection with your end users at this stage, it will give you an opportunity of being able to present your solution a lot more effectively because you already have some practice by reaching those users already. And then next, of course, is the team slide. You want to design the team slide so that it feels personal to you. Don't crowd out the text too much. You want to show who's on your team and how they have contributed, but really you want to be making that personal connection with the audience this time. So don't, it can be a place where people like to crowd all the different details about everything that anyone's ever done here. Really make sure the pictures are big, build that connection, smiles, make sure they are all in the same format really does help. Next, the demo time. You have 2 minutes for your demo. You really want to develop and practice a walkthrough of this in advance. However, you want to also have that backup plan. So what I suggest here is to prepare a wireframe demo using GIFs or screenshots that are inserted into your slide deck directly, that you can do a quick walkthrough if, for example, something isn't working. I know you will be preparing videos alongside your code, so you will have that on hand. You might want to splice a few GIFs of the different functionalities of your solution. That could be a way to have on hand in case you want to, if it comes up in a question and you want to be able to show someone very quickly that you have that and you've done your homework, or if, for example, something isn't working in that. But of course, you want to isolate your demo to what you feel comfortable showing, and be very important to really speak about the user and that vision as you're going through your demonstration. Very oftentimes, presenters will just kind of go through the functionalities and they'll say, okay, and then you can click here and then click here and then this opens. But really remember your storytelling here. So you think about putting yourself as you're doing the demo, maybe personify it. So, as Jane is our user, and she is using the bird app, and this is how she would go about looking and identifying a bird in the app that we've developed. And really try to make that, you always want to think about how you can bring it back down to the human level. Help your audience feel like they are really in the position of your end user, so that they really build that connection with what you've created. So of course, develop the backup plan just in case. And of course, pay very close attention to timing, especially during demos. People can get carried away. It is something, especially when you're so proud of what you've done, and 2 minutes is really not very much time at all, but make sure you have a timer and you have planned what sequence you're going to go through when it comes to your demo, so that you don't get flustered and you can keep right on time. And then next, preparing for a question time. Really think about what types of questions you might be asked in advance. And what I think is really a kind of a bonus is you're not limited to the number of slides that you can have. And what I really love to have when questions come up is a slide that answers that questioner's question right away. And you can kind of think about like going through the different organizational requirements. in your 2-minute presentation, you won't have time to share or disclose everything that you want to say, but you will have answers for them. And say they do come up in the questions, you can prepare for those and make a slide that is specific for that question. Maybe it doesn't come up, but if it does, you have some evidence that you can go directly to, and it really shows that you've done your homework. And even if the question doesn't come up, you will be more prepared overall. So really think about, if I'm going to make a few bonus slides, what should they cover? Or maybe you have a functionality that is really special. There's kind of some advice sometimes that, don't answer the question that you were asked, answer the question you wanted to be asked. This is not something I would suggest in this case, but we know from, the recent political debates and whatnot, it's something that comes up very frequently. But say you have something that comes up as you are explaining an answer to a question, and you want to show some point of pride or something that really does touch on an aspect of that answer or that response. This would be some place where you could prepare a few extra slides to basically pull out of your hat at the end, which I think is a very great way of being able to showcase all of those aspects you wouldn't have had time during your talk to say. But if there's time at the end, you can use that space really effectively. So I really think developing a few bonus slides is really key to creating effective presentation. And then moving right along, okay, we have a few weeks left before the presentations begin. What do we need to be able to do? So first, we've talked about this a number of times, and I really want to impress this on everyone, is thinking about understanding your users, really reaching out to them, doing some interviews, capturing some data about how users or that suspected end user would connect or use your product, even if it's not in a final form. By making that effort to go out and understand them and connect with them, it will be a really impressive point for the judges and also for your entrepreneurial journey, because so much about developing a product is making that connection with the user by that end user, that market for your product. And so it's something that you can begin developing and honing that skill. It will make your solution or your product better. There's this very often said quote that no product survives the first touch with a customer. So if you have not reached out to your end user and you are going to be presenting your hackathon project without doing that, you will get questions that you will not be able to answer, because you will not be able to anticipate how a user may react or respond to your product. So if you do that now, you will be able to address those questions, you'll be prepared, and you'll be able to have a better product. So this is something that you really need to take the time to do within your teams. Try to identify where your users are, how you can reach them. If you can't, if say you have a government client or something similar, work with your subject matter experts. Maybe find an adjacent type field where you actually can find access to your end user. Think creatively about how you can get that information to make your product better and how you can incorporate and develop that into your story. So really think about what feedback you've gotten, identify the different insights from what feedback you've received from everyone you've reached out to. Really take a chance to collect that systematically and show how you can deploy that back into the next version of the product and use that to build that product better. I know you don't have a lot of time, but this is the time to really use that time most effectively, and there couldn't be and more effective use of time to do that than reaching out to those users right now. Next, as you're developing your story, you're thinking about your use case, you're thinking about what makes you unique. Identify those different quotes that you can showcase how you've really done that homework. And then one thing you can do is think about developing this presentation blueprint. So if you want to think about, okay, these 5 different things, can you answer these 5 questions, these 5 different blank lines for your solution right now as it stands? So what would that opening 30 seconds look like? Try to visualize this right now. What is that problem statement that you're able to answer? Who is that main character that you're building for? And how do you understand their challenge? What happens when they have a solution to that challenge? What changes for them? Try to be able to find answers to each of these different things. And as a team, put all of your answers to this blueprint together and see how similar they are. Do they match? Are they, do you have congruence between everyone? And you might be surprised that not everyone's blueprint connects in the same way. So I think that having some disagreement or having some differing opinions is really healthy, especially in a startup. And having that challenge really does make your the kind of capacity of your problem and your solution much better. So really, I think setting up a blueprint like this before you develop your presentation is a great way of making sure you cover all of your bases and that you have a way of showcasing each of these different aspects to reach that to reach those features that we want to see in the most effective technology presentations. So I know that was a lot of information and we have blown by everything, but I want to leave some room for questions. And Thelma, is there anything we haven't covered that we should chat about? I know we've had a long day here, so.
I put that sample deck up there, but I want to emphasize you don't have to have an agenda slide. I just was showing you how to build a deck. Follow some of the comments that Natalie, this recording will be available well before the presentation is due. So that will be helpful. Natalie had some very good points. I don't know if we really have access to end users. I think the alternative is your subject matter expert.
Yeah, so use what you have access to, and you can be creative. If I come across this question a lot, and they're like, I have no way of connecting with my users. If you're coming across that, I mean, I've looked at some of the challenges that you have, and if you're having difficulty trying to get inside the heads of that end user, think creatively. Where might they be? Maybe they're discussing their problem on a forum, or they're on Facebook talking about the problem. How can you find evidence that you've developed this app? Maybe it has a number of different. Maybe it has too many functionalities. Maybe they want something simpler. This is something we find that happens a lot with many early stage startups. Is there is this kind of entrepreneurial dilemma that the entrepreneur always feels like they have the answer, they know what's right. There's a bias oftentimes, and it is very humbling to go to that end user and really try to understand how they see it from their perspective. I mean, I could see some energy interface at the Children's Museum turning into this really beautiful thing that kids couldn't end up using at all because there's too many functions. So you don't want to get yourself in a trap like that. And it's something that is very important before you build too far to really know what your not only the organization is looking for in that solution, but also the people that will be the ones that will use that. And it is something that they do ask you for, and showing how that impact will be made. So if you can think really creatively about that, I think it would be a nice result to be able to
Yeah,
showcase.
I agree with her creative thinking. So, like for the bird game, you may be your own end user because you might want to use a game like that because it's supposed to be similar to Pokemon Go. And if you played that game and you have some friends that played that game, you would ask them to check it out. If you have some nieces, young nieces and nephew, you can have them check out the display, right? Uh, the AI tool for learning more about Hawaii, have your parents try it out. So that's where it doesn't hurt to have somebody try something, and I think
Because a
one of the quick
Pokemon
things,
Go game for like a Gen Z person might be really easy, but there's a lot of bird watchers and bird enthusiasts that are not Gen Z that might really love to use the app, but it might be too difficult for them.
yeah,
And
exactly.
so that's really about like being able to show that intuition and that understanding is really important as an entrepreneur, and also in terms of communicating that value that you provide in your solution. So it is, I think, a really important skill to think about developing and incorporating, not just in your presentation, but it also ultimately makes your product better.
Well, in a 4-week hackathon, simple 2 words are really important. Simple elegance. So it doesn't have to be overly complicated. And your presentation should be simple elegance. Your solution should be simple elegance. If I look at the past year winners, they solved the problem elegantly, differently, powerfully, and they presented it well too. So the fact that you have 2 scores, one that actually work, and we know that the judges actually know that by the time or you wouldn't be presenting. So did the technology work is already answered. Now they want to know why it works, why you chose this challenge, why you're interested in this particular solution, why you approached it this way. Your story is now important at this phase. And I
Mm-hmm.
really like that she talks about developing your story, because this is why did you pick this challenge of all the other challenges? Why did you come up with using, this method of coding for it rather than this method? And you obviously don't go to the other method. You talk about, we chose to use Salesforce to do this because blah, 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 or we coded in Python because blah, blah, blah. So you want to make sure that you're telling them why you made your choices. And then in the demo, you show how elegantly it works. Again, we gave you an extra minute on the demonstration because we felt the judges from previous years felt that you didn't have enough time to really showcase your solutions. So we added an extra minute. There used to be 5 minutes. So really you want to make sure that you use those 2 minutes to really showcase the really that you've solved this problem elegantly and cleanly, and look how fun it is to use too, type of thing.
And Donna, you say elegant, and you bring up elegant a lot, an elegant solution, and maybe sometimes it feels like, oh, elegant is like being in like a fancy like Oscar dress, and like it's like very
No, no,
beautiful.
no.
But in this sense, it's really about something that is simple, that is easy, that feels effortless, that feels natural.
Yeah,
And
yeah, exactly right.
sometimes I think a lot of times we are so excited to show all the things we can add to something, especially, oh, I can add a button here, I can add a button, I can put all these different things in there. And really oftentimes, and that's you might have heard of the concept of developing this minimum viable product is what is the smallest thing you can do that has the most leverage in developing an outcome. So really think if you have to distill something down to the smallest thing, and this is a really hard skill. You might have heard the term. I would have given you a shorter presentation if I had more time. Like this idea that being very concise and being very strategic with what you say is a lot harder. So before, when Twitter had the character count, where it is a lot shorter than it is now, people, the communication was so much different than it is now that people can just put giant diatribes on there. And it's really a skill to be able to narrow. And you often think, oh, I'm cutting away all this stuff, it's all good, and I've worked so hard and there's all these things and it's all good. That is where you can use your presentation and your voice to make that connection with that audience, bring them along, to encourage them that you have that answer. And so it's really about kind of sparking that excitement from them. It's not about giving it all away. Especially as the hackathon is 4 weeks, you haven't solved world hunger yet. I really hope you do, but right now you probably don't have time. So it's really about captivating them and exciting them to come along with you on that journey. And the way you do that is by making that connection, by telling that story, by getting them excited, and putting yourself, that human side, into how you are presenting this piece of technology. And that's kind of really that story I'd like to leave you all with today.
Does anybody have any questions for Natalie today? It's a lot of content, and so we'll be sharing the recording so you can go back and watch some of the stuff that might, and maybe that'll help.
And yeah, I encourage you to do the blueprint at the end if
I was going
that
to
is
ask you to put the
helpful.
blueprint, a copy of that, or the content.
Yeah, I can share that with you all, and really, as you guys are in your teams together, think about if you can answer all these questions. And this is something I think is really useful when you go, if you are in a position of talking to end users, asking them about their problem, their solution, and see if what they have, what they say, if it confirms how you see the problem, because that is some of the most enlightening conversations you can have. Go to your subject matter experts, develop this, talk about who this main character is, his little the kind of little children at the science museum. What is their challenge? What does that look like? What does it actually take for them to learn? And what are the things they need to learn? How do you understand that? And then when you bring that to them, how does that change? And if it does, how can you incorporate that into what you now know? How you can show that growth?
Okay. Again, if I could ask any questions for Natalie. And Natalie, if you